Now I am. Hi, good morning, everyone. It's at the top of the hour. My name is Anna Lindbergen. I'm with the Clean Buildings team at the Department of Commerce. And let's start this off with an icebreaker. So what I'm just gonna ask a question, and if you could just write your answer in the chat box, that'd be great. So if someone could speak so I can make sure that my audio is good. Okay, good.
I think that's great, Anna.
Okay, I just want to make sure. All right. So icebreaker. I'm wondering what things you've baked while in quarantine. So I'm not a baker, but Annika loved this question, and she actually baked me a chocolate cake at one point. So Annika, what have you baked besides that chocolate cake?
To be exact, that was a Texas chocolate sheet cake. So there was a lot of butter involved there. So we've been baking a lot of things that involve butter. So cookies, breads, pizza actually, and that included butter. So if it has butter in it, we've been trying to bake it.
So yeah, if you could, if you're joining us, we're asking if you've baked anything interesting while in quarantine. I have not baked anything, but that Texas chocolate cake, I felt the butter in my heart. So don't ever bake me anything like that again. Chuck, have you baked anything?
We've been experimenting with coconut flour baked goods. We're trying new flours, non-wheat flours out, and so that's been one of our adventures here.
Interesting.
All right, we got some coming in here.
Anna's made brownies from scratch and biscuits from scratch. That I cannot do. I open packages for that.
It looks like Carrie Mead opened a full-on bakery. She's doing all sorts of stuff.
Yeah. Triple layer vanilla cake with buttercream frosting. That sounds delicious. Ooh.
Yeah, that one was for my my son's birthday. So
that's impressive. Very impressive. Giant sourdough loaf. That's what I want to learn how to do, is sourdough loaf. We got macaroons, some churros. That's interesting. That sounds delicious. David made a lot of pizza. Got it.
Yeah. All right. So, we'll throw out another question, and we're still waiting for people to gather here a couple of minutes. So we're entertaining.
So while we're on the topic of food, how about what's the first restaurant you want to dine in when all of this, when things start to open up? I myself love Korean barbecue, and I cannot wait to go to a Korean barbecue restaurant. What about you, Chuck? Is there a place that you kind of been missing?
Wow, I haven't even thought about that.
I have. I've been thinking about it.
I'm just going to say there's a favorite brew club I would certainly like to visit. It's not just about the food.
Yeah. Sushi is a pretty popular answer. I think Annika mentioned sushi earlier in our conversation.
I did mention sushi. That is one of those things I don't ever want to learn because I love going out to eat for it.
Is there a specific place that you like locally?
Here in Olympia, it's the Sushi House. I really enjoy going there, and it's just, I always walk out feeling so satisfied.
Amy, a meal without children. I love it, Amy. Yes.
I second that, Amy.
All right.
All right. How many folks do we have online?
We have 50.
Sounds like we're gathering up here.
Yeah.
Why don't you try one more question, and then we'll
one more.
One more, and then we'll start the official program.
This is my favorite one. What is your first trip after quarantine, whether domestic or internationally? That's a big one I've been daydreaming about, because I had a trip going on a small Asian tour to Japan, South Korea, and then to Guam, where my mom is. So that was supposed to be my trip in November, but I think I'm going to wait until it's all in the clear. Carrie wants to go to Italy. And then Brittany, are you going to go to Disney World, I'm sure, in Florida? Chuck, do you have any plans to go anywhere?
Well, my first trip will be a hike someplace a little more ambitious than the state parks. But that'll open up before any of the big travel. Oh, Luke's heading to the Salmon River again.
Corey is going to the Columbia River.
There's a couple of people chasing line.
Any
baseball game. There you go. That would be a change, wouldn't it? All right. We're officially 6 minutes into it.
All right. I'm just going to pass this over to Annika to give you a little housekeeping rules, and then we'll pass it on to Chuck for his presentation. Annika?
Great, thanks. So I want to welcome everyone to today's workshop. My name is Annika McDonald. I am a part of the Clean Buildings team here within the Energy Division at the Department of Commerce. So thank you once again for participating, and I want to notify you that we are recording this workshop, and we will post today's presentation and the recording on our website. So for those of you who joined by phone, please email buildings@commerce.wa.gov with your contact details so we have record of your participation. There's also no option to unmute your phone and ask questions. So we will, at the end of once we have a question and answer time at the end, I will unmute you. If you would like to participate and utilize the chat function, we ask you that you log into the workshop via computer or using the WebEx app. So throughout today's workshop, we want to hear your feedback and answer your questions. If you have questions or comments, please submit them in the group chat box. Please do not send them to Chuck and Luke, who will be presenting. Anna Lynn will be monitoring the chat box and will notify Chuck and Luke when questions arise. So once again, thanks for participating in today's ASHRAE Standard 100, Section 4 Administrative Procedures Workshop.
All right, thank you. I'll give you the opportunity to see just for a minute that I actually am still keeping the beard trimmed. I haven't got a beard down to my waist yet. I put a shirt with a collar on. It's a beautiful day here in Olympia, your state capital, and I'm glad you were able to join us. I'm going to start by running through basically an outline of today's presentation, just to orient folks a little. I'm going to point out a couple features in the law, just to remind folks, and then we'll start looking at the draft that we posted online earlier this week. Folks, I don't recall when these comments are due on the draft we're going to be reviewing. If somebody could be ready to give that at the end of the presentation from Commerce, that would be useful. Thank you. So moving right into it, somebody confirm you can see the PowerPoint.
I see it.
Great.
All right, great. We're on a roll. We've thrown this disclaimer up, just a reminder, this is pre-rulemaking drafts, and these are Well, they're fairly refined drafts. We hope not to change them a lot, but throughout the rulemaking process, these things will be updated as we receive comments or we discover new content that we need to move into certain sections. As we continue working through the process, it continues to impact other sections that we might have to revisit. So I'm just going to quickly run through the outline here of the presentation. There's quite a lot of text we've added, largely to provide clarity, to some extent in order to implement some sections of the law that aren't part of Standard 100. First, we're going to run through Section 4 of Standard 100 and the revisions we propose. There aren't a great deal of changes here. This section primarily refers to other sections, providing brief instructions to folks on what to do. It also refers you to all the reporting requirements. And so that's a fairly light touch. But then we felt it was necessary to create a whole new normative annex that contains the Washington state reporting requirements. It's quite long because there's a lot of variations in who reports and when you report what, and we've tried to clarify that here in order to you're going to have to pick a path, and once you pick a path, only a few of the sections will actually apply. So we created Normative Annex Z. It will be published as an addendum to the Standard 100. It'll stand alone completely. It doesn't modify other sections to any great extent. And it will be the instruction set for reporting. It starts out with what are the reporting requirements. Well, first it begins with what are the notification requirements that Commerce must make to building owners, and building owner responses to those initial notifications. Commerce is asked by the law to provide notification to all building owners by July 1 of 2021. We're working hard to have that ready. We created some brief rules on how an interaction might occur in that time frame. Then when we get to the state reporting requirements for building owners, those are the mandatory requirements that kick in during the compliance periods that begin in 2026. Outlines some schedules and then more detailed documentation of the compliance with the standard. Now, as I noted just a minute ago, documentation of compliance with the standard, there are multiple paths here we will explore depending on the compliance route that the building owner chooses to use. We created a standalone set of instructions. They're brief. They just tell you, if you're doing it this way, these are the documentation you have to provide to Commerce. Down near the bottom, you're going to see that we've added a few items that aren't part of the standard. Continued reporting until completion, annual reporting, and completion reporting. I'm going to flip forward in a moment to the state law to note why we've included those things. It's primarily because the state law allows some delayed implementation under certain conditions. And when people choose those options, we want to make sure that they're continuing to make progress towards the goals. So here's the section in the law that kind of triggers those additional reporting requirements that we've developed. It's the last sentence in this paragraph in the RCW. The implementation plan may include phased implementation such that the building owner is not required to replace systems or equipment before the system or equipment's useful life. It allows people to time out when they make some of their improvements past the statutory deadlines. There are some administrative features we won't be covering today. We didn't detail certification of buildings of historic significance. That will be a fairly simple form following state rules that we'll make reference to. And the next section is basically the interaction between the Department of Commerce and folks that we find to be in violation of the standard. How will the violations occur? How will we notify people? What are the administrative penalties associated with violations? And then we'll have an appeals process so folks can make their case that we got it wrong and that they're not required to pay any penalties. So those things aren't detailed today, but they are going to be in one of our next several meetings. All right. That's the general background to get us started. Now I'm going to switch to our review of Section 4 as we published it as a review draft. That review draft is posted. Once again, we encourage people to use the review draft to make very specific comments on sections. The more specific you are, the more helpful it is. The more likely we'll be able to take action and do something related to your comments. So I just take this and mark it up if I were folks wanting to create comments. So Section 4, we did not edit it a great deal, as I said before. I have highlighted a few things and made some comments. For example, Table 7-1 that's currently in the standard will have a new list of building types once we coalesce the target setting and the Energy Star building types. So it's just a reminder for folks that there are some things that will still be changing as we move forward. We deleted the residential building types and instructions related to that because residential buildings only apply to small residential buildings. Actually, any building with 5 units or more is classified here as commercial. Just a reminder that the application of residential buildings is only relevant to the incentive program. They are not going to be required to comply with the standard in a mandatory fashion. So, scratching out all the residential stuff. I'm going to encourage folks to write things in the comment box if you have a question as we go. When it's a light edit like this, I might move a little fast. So if you want to slow me down, just type up a comment and we'll double back and catch your question. So the standard already requires, you know, the operation and maintenance program in section 6. I just noticed this morning, I highlighted previous year. I might want to tune that up to coalesce with, you know, prior to, give people a little buffer space in there. You know, currently the law says 2 years prior to the client's year is included, not in the law, but in standard 100. Perhaps we'll tune that up further. Energy management plan, once again, that's required in section 5. This just provides a pointer. Building energy use. You'll recall when we were talking about sections 8 and 9, we created a new reference to buildings that don't have comprehensive energy metering. All I've done here is move that language into this section of section 4. Also, we did get some comments back from people that we should define that in the border here. You see me tinkering with a possible definition that will roll in a little later. If folks have comment they'd like to provide on what they think comprehensive energy metering means, or even renaming that to something more appropriate, I'm open to that, certainly. But I scratched out an idea of what a definition might look like. Here you see us starting to make reference to Annex Z, which is our new annex. In this case, it's in reference to our historic significance. Once again, we'll develop a short form there that allows people to demonstrate their building meets that definition. So once again, all we're doing here is when a specific form is probably not enough, you see it here in the new Form A, you know, is not the appropriate scope. It doesn't have everything you need to get through this section. You'll see it as we move forward. But at any rate, just putting in the reference to move people to the right place in the standard. Once again, simply adding some text that supports buildings without comprehensive energy metering. Then as we get down to the historic building, that's a repeat of the section above that we modified. I did not change the verification of compliance. You know, for folks in conditional compliance, basically the standard says you have 15 months to verify that your energy management implementation at least provided 75% of the energy savings projected from the audit. If not, you're required by note A there to go back and do additional work, which once again extends the timeline when somebody might be trying to demonstrate compliance. So within the context of, the general requirements here at the end of the chapter, we just make sure that people get their reference to Normative Annex Z. That's where we put all these administrative requirements rather than inserting them here. And then, this alternative energy targets, that's just another way to describe the work we're doing to develop a target specific to the state of Washington. And we'll consider using this once everything's pretty much all wrapped up. I did note that we have yet to develop any specific procedures for more recently constructed buildings. That may need to occur. I'm not certain at this point, but I'm notifying folks that there may be additional instructions along those lines. So that's my walkthrough of Section 4. I don't think it was particularly complicated, but I'll pause for a second and see if anyone has any questions they'd like to toss out there at this point. Okay, I guess that was easy. Somebody want to check in? Tell me I'm still online and everybody can see it.
Chuck.
All right. All right. When it gets quiet for a long time, you got to wonder.
I know how you feel.
All right. So this is our new Appendix Z. And basically, the first section we've created here is for the interactions that we anticipate between the Department of Commerce, the AHJ, when we send out the notification required by law to building owners that we've identified through a process of research in order to assure that the building owners are well informed and they know their obligations early in the process. So basically it describes the research we'll do, as well as the fact that we have to notify both the building owners as well that are required to comply, as well as the residential buildings that might apply for the incentive. We're going to try and include enough information that we can track people's reporting and compliance over time. And we are beginning the development of a database system where we'll be able to interact with people, exchange data, and folks will be able to report online their any corrections that they might need to provide us. Here's the date by which we're going to Normative Annex Z is posted with the Section 4 document. There's a single document. will the database of covered commercial buildings be public info? Yes, it will. So let's see here. These are just some dates when we'll make notifications. So we're asking building owners to respond to notifications when they receive them. It will be good for commerce and the building owner to establish communications through our web portal. It will be good for building owners to, make sure our data is correct and up to date. And so we are asking building owners to correct any errors we may have on our data. And there's a part of the process here where we're going to be notifying building owners, even if they have what appears to be somewhat less square footage than 50,000. Our county assessor data isn't 100% accurate. We don't know much about the building use types. We may not know how much of the space is conditioned versus unconditioned space. And so one of the early correction and errors might be that we notified you and your building does not have to comply. And so we're encouraging folks to provide that information back to us as well. We are going to try and err on over notifying rather than under notifying to make sure that we do capture the right people and they do receive fair notification. Okay, so that's the end of notifications. Next section. This is building owners' requirements. This is the requirements that occur during the compliance period. These first couple of sections are right out of the law. And there was really no changes here other than what's in the law, compliance schedule. Now, there's an awkward trick that we have to consider here. In the law, it says that people must apply for exceptions or conditional compliance prior to the compliance date. Well, they must have it approved prior to the compliance date. Now, that implies that folks are going to notify Commerce earlier, that Commerce will have time to approve the compliance and get back to folks prior to the compliance date. So we moved up their deadline for submitting documentation by 180 days. I'm just going to say this is sort of an awkward position for everybody. Commerce is asking folks to report early to some extent, and Commerce is committing to getting that review done on time. So that's something we thought we'd have to incorporate here. We've done it both for conditional compliance and exceptions. If folks have alternate ideas or comments, we'd welcome them. Let's see. We got a question here. What if the building owner leasing a space to a business who's causing them not to comply? Can the business leasing the space be held accountable? The law specifies the building owner. We didn't create special obligations for folks that lease the building. So they're going to have to work together in order to come up with a reasonable accommodation there. If you had any ideas on, structured ways to handle that within the context of the law, we could consider those. So far, we haven't really addressed it. It's not really addressed well within the context of the law or the standard. Okay, back to our document. So there are a good number of subsections created here because our law provides multiple ways to comply. There's a couple of different ways within the standard, and once again, because we have this possibly extended timeline, we have added some detail that distinguish those folks from folks that might comply, well within the time frame of meeting the deadline. The first one is documentation of compliance through exceptions. We've created a form that lists all the possible exceptions. We've asked folks to, document that their building is not required to comply due to one of the exceptions in the law. And so we'll see that when we get to forms. Buildings that meet the energy utilization index target, we anticipate this will be the vast majority of buildings. They will be able to demonstrate that their building is already operating below the EYT, and but they still need to implement sections 5 and 6, complete the forms A, B, and C. So A is your general compliance form, and it will include documenting your energy management plan and O&M plan. It summarizes data from B and C, just a couple of figures that you need to transfer. Form B is your EUIT worksheet, where you figure out what the specific EUIT of your building is. That's your energy utilization target. And then Form C is where you report your actual energy use. In our case, it's going to be the weather normalized EUI. And as we introduced in previous meetings, we'll be adopting Energy Star Portfolio Manager to create Form C reports. So that gives you an idea of the forms that will be required for folks that can comply by having energy use below their target. Now, when we get to folks that are using the investment criteria, these are folks that will be implementing energy efficiency measures because their building is operating above their target. It's folks that are required, because you're using the building investment criteria and you need to install EEMs, there's a number of steps you need to go through. In addition to Form A, B, and C. You'll have to complete energy audits and the appropriate economic evaluation in order to demonstrate that you've adopted all cost-effective measures. Now, this particular section is created in anticipation that folks will finish all this before the compliance date.
Chuck, we have a question.
Okay.
You mentioned that Energy Star portfolio will create the energy use report for Form C. Is that a new export specifically for Washington? Can you describe it a bit more?
We're going to get into great detail coming up here when we actually review our instructions around Form C. So we'll get to that shortly. Once again, we're going to review these forms in detail a little bit later. Just a few minutes. So, in this case, this is a UIT, but you're applying through conditional compliance. By the reporting period, all the measures have been installed, but you get 15 months to verify that the savings have come in. So that's, so this is written specifically for that. And the only difference between this and earlier is that we've included a continued reporting as specified in 2.6. We'll get to that. Because folks are going to have extended time periods to finish their work and comply, we've created some reporting that goes around that extended time period. Once again, this is the building investment criteria pathway, and it's much like the section up above, except for the fact that section 2.6, once again, continued reporting has been added. We also need to create an exception for folks that are using phased implementation. And I think this is the only place it applies. I think we'll have to put some more thought into that. I welcome any comments folks have relative to this, making sure that we get it in all the right places and that the language is useful. So for continued reporting, we've created 2.6. It has two elements. One is annual reporting. We'll have to figure out a date specific for annual reporting. But basically, we're asking folks to turn in their Section 5 reports that are required to be completed every year by the standard. We're simply asking people to share those reports with us on an annual basis if they're not complete with their work. And then finally, at the bottom here, completion reporting. Folks that have used an extended schedule to demonstrate compliance once they're completed, they turn in those same reports again. The reports verify that they've completed their work and been successful, and they'll be taken out of the loop of continued reporting and such until the next compliance period. So those are the reporting methodologies that we've developed. Let's see, do I have my chart in here still? So I created a chart primarily because I had to think this through myself, but I shared it with you here. Each section and the required reports that will be requested as applicants, depending on which path they proceed down. This is a summary, just so people understand what we're asking for in another format. So I'm going to pause there. We're about to dive into forms. I'm going to give the mic over to Luke Howard, who's been working on these. So let's see.
Chuck,
Do we
I
want
just
to take any questions?
Yeah, I actually want to read what Anna Beatty, our database manager, or sorry, Anna, I kind of butchered your title, but she's going to be, she's kind of, you want to unmute yourself and kind of talk about the database and what you wrote? Or I could just read it. So Anna Beatty just said, just to follow up on the database being public info and utilities being able to view it. I've taken note to this question and will follow up with our IT. We're currently planning out the database so that there's a lot of unknowns still about how entities outside of Commerce IT system will interact with the database. If you have any ideas about what would be helpful in terms of access or the type of data you'd like access to, please email Anna at anna.beatty@commerce.wa.gov, and we can have a follow-up conversation. Or you could email the building's email address as well. So Roy asks, will the summary be included in the published standards? Chuck?
This particular table, I hadn't considered including it. I actually made a note that I wasn't planning on it, but if folks encourage me to, we could include it as well, just as a supporting supporting piece of this if it's useful.
Okay. Next question, what if you comply prior to the date, say 2026, but you turn in an annual report in 2028 that shows you have fallen out of compliance?
So there's a limited time frame on what your compliance time period is. And I think it's 2 years. The summary of your EUIT and energy usage can be no more than 2 years prior to your compliance date. So we have constrained the time frame a bit. That's right out of Standard 100. We didn't create that ourselves. And we think that's a reasonable time frame. If you comply and you get your paperwork done early, good on you. I like that. If you fall out of compliance as time goes by, and folks will, we'll catch you in 5 years.
We have a comment from Amy, more for the education WSU folks, but a flow chart that results in what compliance products are needed for different buildings would be useful. And a response from Karen from WSU. Pretty much they're working on a variety of flow charts and timeliness and other graphics that will help grasp the process. Thanks.
Yeah. Karen and I are having a chat about this at the end of the day today.
So it looks like that's it for now. If you want to give them a minute. Luke, it's all yours.
Luke, give me clear instructions when to.
All right. Well, first question is, can you hear me strong and clear?
I can hear you loud and clear.
All right. Thank you. All right. So as Chuck has mentioned before, we have amended the forms from normative Annex C of Standard 100 to create consistency with our law, and the language we are using beats compliance and associated with Energy Star Portfolio Manager. So we will be developing these forms so that they can be electronically submitted to Commerce to document compliance. So first, let's talk about Form A. And now this is just the general compliance form with the standard. So there are a few additions that we added to this from the standard 100 Form A requirements. That includes Washington State unique building ID. And we're also asking for the portfolio manager property ID number. So those are additions to Form A. So we got building identification information as well as contact information. So this will be the building owner's name and associated contact information for that building owner. Chuck, you want to scroll down a little bit? Okay, so qualified person is another item here, as well as, and this may be the designated person from the building owner that's going to be working on these forms. And we're going to ask for contact information as well as what their license status is. Are they certified as the qualified person as defined in the standard? Go ahead and scroll down a little bit here, Chuck. And if there's an energy manager involved with these forms, and there will be with the development of some of these documents, such as the energy management plan and operations and maintenance plan, we're looking for that contact information as well. So beyond contact information, this Form A is also going to require what kind of compliance this form is reporting. So you can see the listed different compliance types here. Building that meets the EUIT, like Chuck mentioned earlier, this will probably be most buildings complying with the standard. So they will be responsible for forms A, B, and C. If they meet the building EUIT without having to do any work to it, forms D and E are not going to be required. Buildings that meet the building investment criteria prior to the compliance date, as well as buildings that will meet the EUIT through conditional compliance or through investment criteria through conditional compliance, will all need to fill out forms D and E respectively. So we'll have you note on this Form A what your compliance path is. And this could just be notification of annual reporting, or it can be the completion reporting. Next, we'll just have a summary of data from Form B and C, also listed on this Form A. So you get your EUIT from Form B. It'll be placed on Form A. Your measured EUI, this will be from Form C or Portfolio Manager, as well as your measured weather normalized site EUI. That'll come from Portfolio Manager as well. And very importantly, we're going to need the compliance dates for the years that you're reporting. Moving on down, Form A will also document that you have or have not completed the energy management requirements for the energy management plan of Section 5. And we will also want this uploaded to our portal. And that goes for the operation and maintenance plan listed here in item 5 that will have to be uploaded to the portal. And the last of the uploaded documents to reported here on Form A is any energy audit performed in compliance with this standard. And we'll talk a little bit more about what we're looking for in terms of an energy audit report when we get down to Form B. Lastly, just checking whether you have all the EEMs required been met and implemented through items 7 and 8 there. Are there, Annalyn, are there any questions related to Form A? And I'll move on.
Not specifically to Form A. We do have a question. Do you want to hear it, or would you like to move on?
If it's, yeah, we can, why don't you go ahead and throw it out?
Okay, is there a plan to be a procedure for documenting changes in owner intensity of use that impact energy use during the extended conditional compliance period?
Chuck, you can add to this if you want, but any information reported will have to be updated when final compliance is actually submitted. Chuck, do you have anything to add to that?
So I'll detail that a little. So you'll notice in my, I think it's Z2.6, the extended reporting period, you have to turn in forms A, B, and C again on an annual basis and at completion. Now, that's going to include updates to your target as well as updates to your, your actual weather normalized EUI. So if there's a major change in the building that changes the target for the building, and folks are going to document that sort of change on an annual basis, as required in Section 5, but we're going to ask to see that at the periodic time periods we've outlined in Z2.6.
Great, thanks for the details, Chuck. So lastly, on Form A, we're just asking for the signature of the people involved in the reporting. So importantly, we want to have the signature of the building owner. This will also be signed by the folks at Commerce. Form B. So Form B is the calculation and reporting of energy target, energy use intensity target, so the EUIT. And this will also list the building activity types. So we'll run through this information here. So we want, Chuck, can you actually scroll back up a little bit? There we go. So all the typical building identification information will be reported on this as well, so we can get the paperwork lined up. We want to list the building's climate zone. So it's going to be 4C or 5B for Washington State. Any buildings in climate zone 6 shall use the climate zone 5B targets Okay, go ahead and scroll up there, Chuck. Really no real significant changes to Form B from Standard 100 for the most part, but we are considering using other building operation associated normalization factors. So there may be more listed for calculating the EUIT when we've finalized some of that, the target setting. So expect, or you may see some additions here rather than just the operating shifts normalization factor. Go ahead and scroll down, Chuck. So this is an example. This is what the Standard 100 Form B looks like right now. We are going to update this to cover the changes that I have previously mentioned. We are also going to supplant the Energy Star Portfolio Manager billing activity types within this form rather than using, and that'll be consistent with the activity targets work we've been doing, SBW and Poppy Storm have been doing. Go ahead and scroll up, Chuck. This is just an example of the existing form. It may not look too similar to this in the end, but it will include all the pertinent information. All right, go ahead and scroll on down, Chuck. I don't know if there's anything here that you wanted to. Here we go. So, all right.
You know, you do all this work for one reason. It's to come up with your UIT.
Yeah, right. And this will give us an idea, you know, it also documents the different billing activity types and fraction of use for those billing activity types in development of that EUIT. Okay, so moving on to Form C. This is the energy use intensity calculations. Again, we will be using Energy Star Portfolio Manager to perform these calculations. So builders will have to set up an account with Energy Star Portfolio Manager and communicate with the utility company. The utility company, in most cases, will be able to directly upload utility data for that building to the portfolio manager to help with these calculations. But the building owner will have to go into portfolio manager and fill out the appropriate fields in order to obtain the calculation. It is important, a few things here I want to mention is we will have the EPA program in a read-only access and data exchange feature for Washington State. This will be a function that will have to be selected by the user, by the building owner, in order for us to receive the data from Portfolio Manager. So we can use our portal that we're developing to automatically upload this data for reporting purposes. Another thing to note here is within Energy Star Portfolio Manager, we are making it a requirement that the data quality checker is used by the user in order to highlight any errors that may be present before reporting a final or before finalizing the reporting of this data for the building's EUI calculation. So part of the data that we are asking for to be reported automatically from the portfolio manager is listed in this fairly exhaustive list here. You'll notice the far right column list has an X next to the data that we're interested in obtaining from the portfolio manager report. So this is all automatically reported by portfolio manager. It doesn't require any additional work from the building owner. They fill out the portfolio manager, get their EUI for their building. This data will be automatically generated within portfolio manager. So you'll notice here we have the second column talks about the metric name. And if we're interested in that, the final right column will have an X in it for the data that we want. So Chuck, you can kind of scroll through here. You can see we have property information. This is typical information to identify the property use types, gross floor area. Go ahead and keep scrolling a bit, Chuck. Most of this information is directly related to information we need to document compliance with the standard. Go ahead and keep going there, Chuck. You guys can all look at this closely on your own as well, and please provide comment. We are not interested in some of the information the portfolio manager generates, such as water usage. So anything related to water usage, we will not be seeking that information. Go ahead and scroll a little bit more there. It will list all the fuel types and consumption data, and that'll all be converted to kBTUs automatically within the system. Keep going there, Chuck. More fuel stuff. There are some alert functions within the Energy Star portfolio manager that help alert the user and us where data there may be questions regarding the data entered. Again, you look up there, it does state whether the data quality checker was run or not, so that'll be important, as mentioned before. More water information that we're not necessarily interested in obtaining. We're not interested in obtaining the source energy use. We're all about site energy use. That's information. We're not interested in the national median EUI, because Washington State is developing their own targets. So it's a fairly exhaustive list. You'll see what information we're interested in obtaining. Please comment if you have any comments. Again, more water information, greenhouse gas information. We're going to take the data we get on energy consumption, and if our reporting requirements ask for greenhouse gas emissions, we can make those calculations based on Washington State standards. Go ahead and keep scrolling there, Chuck. It does report renewables. We'll be getting that data. Heating degree days, weather station.
Yeah. We're still not sure Energy Star is going to net out renewables consistent with standard 100. We're working with EPA to resolve if we need an additional rule about that or not.
Thanks, Chuck. Okay, so that's pretty much what Portfolio Manager is doing, and Form C, again, will be reported through Portfolio Manager. Forms D and E, these forms document and report the energy audit. We want the energy audit to be reported consistent with the forms from ASHRAE Standard 211. So this will create a consistent data and format for reporting. So on our end of things, we can have more success in reporting if we all have a consistent format to report a known amount of data. So we're going to use ASHRAE Standard 211 as our base there. There are several programs out there and for reporting energy audits that will comply with the ASHRAE Standard 211. One of them that we've listed here is the Building Energy Asset Score. It's a product developed by you. You can report online. They have an energy asset score tool, which is kind of a summary of the building and the audit. But within that, they also have an audit template. And that audit template is consistent with the format and the data that we require for reporting. This can be automatically submitted through the DOE's website for this asset score tool. That can be automatically submitted to Commerce, and there can be communication through this program between Commerce and the client.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to add to that?
I just wanted to add, I'll show the spreadsheet in a second here, but the Building Energy Score tool and its audit input addition is being used in places like New York City for their mandatory audit procedure. There are others, I can't recall them off the top of my head, but it's already getting great use. We attended a good webinar and it looked like a really good tool for not only the user, but also to create interactions between the user and the administrator. So we don't end up with cluttered piles of forms. As things get fixed and revised, they get updated and simply shared across the portal. So it looks very promising to us, and we're going to continue to consider that. Another example that's right out of the ASHRAE Standard 211 handbook is they reference a spreadsheet version where they, simplified a lot of the data entry by creating lists, descriptions. Then, you go through your level 2 and you begin to do your more detailed, assessments, and it comes up with a, well, that's audit 1 summary, but basically it comes up with good summaries of the actions that are intended to be taken, does the preliminary simple payback calculation. It's also got, things like place to put your utility incentives so you can get that net cost. It's pretty complete. So there are 2 ways you could kind of review what we're proposing here. One is review the spreadsheet referenced in our document, as well as having a look at the asset tool or attending one of their webinars. Once again, we're trying to create consistency in reporting in order to standardize the sorts of review that Commerce are going to have to make. And that's the primary function of that report form.
Thanks, Chuck.
So links are embedded here. Check it out.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what kind of comments we'll have on those tools. So Form D, as stated, will document all features of the Level 2 audit. The Level 3 audit, the big difference there is the economic evaluation tool. So Form E is going to be the life cycle cost analysis tool required for meeting the standard when you're using the economic criteria to comply. So any energy efficiency measures should be evaluated through this tool. And we have an example tool here, which is being used currently. It's a life cycle cost analysis tool used by the state. So there's a lot of supporting documentation and tools or resources on the tool that you can check out through these links here. Again, this is just an example of the tool that Commerce will be developing as a resource and a requirement for the audit 3 or Level 3 audit economic analysis criteria. So it's all based off of this standard 135.
Yeah, and I expect it to be somewhat simplified from what you see in this tool. This tool is designed to do a complete building construction project, all the details, rather than just energy efficiency upgrades. But you can see the calculation methodology used here.
And this tool will be consistent with state law, whereas many of the other tools out there aren't necessarily designed for this law.
And the key feature is that it will be made consistent with the standard 135, which is a reference standard within the existing standard 100.
Any questions related to forms? All right. Chuck, you want to carry us home?
Okay. We're running up on our time thing here, so we better get going. So once again, I've created instructions for how to apply for exemptions. This is all new text. I'm not going to cover a great deal of detail here today. I think what you'll see is that we've largely simply created rules around the actual set of exemptions that are listed within the standard. Made a few specific changes like this. I think this says in the law, it says the majority. I made sure we know that's more than 50%. And that's true throughout the standard. Basically, all we're asking for is that folks acknowledge which exemption they're applying for and provide us with some documentation we suggested. I think one place folks could be helpful is if they have any specific information that might help us better, well, assure that we can document conditions of financial hardship accurately. We think we have what we need here, but if there are any additions, let us know. Here's all the detailed stuff. Here's some recommended sets of documentation. We're asking to provide at least 2. If those are, if there's good documentation out there that we haven't thought of, please let us know. We'll roll it into the rule. So, and then once again here at the end, additional sections to be developed and will be discussed in one of our upcoming meetings are the details around what's a fairly minor form on historic significance, and then probably some important stuff here on notice of violations, administrative penalties, and appeals process. Those are to be developed. All right. Wow, time flies. So that's our overview of all the changes we've made here. I don't see lots of questions flooding in here on our conversation. I assume you folks are going to take some time to digest this and get back to us. Once again, somebody listed in our notes here the date we would most like to see your comments back. We posted June 12th for that. If folks could give us feedback by then, it'd be greatly appreciated. Yeah, so let's go see what's in our schedule coming up.
All right. I just want to thank everyone again. Thanks, Chuck. Great presentation. Thanks, Luke. I just want to thank everyone for attending today's Clean Buildings Workshop. We appreciate the comments, the questions, and overall participation. We hope you continue to attend future workshops. The next workshop is scheduled for June 10, and we will be covering additional administrative procedures. So we're going to go in depth with some things that we didn't cover today. Comments for this workshop will be due on June 12th. Feel free to send them in at any point in time, actually, but we do have to put in a due date, which would be June 12th. The next workshop after that would be June 18, and we'll cover, SBW will come back and cover targets, normalization, and new construction. All scheduled workshops and comment deadlines will be found on the Clean Buildings website. I will enter the website on the chat box. If you have any additional questions that you kind of think of after we get offline, feel free to email the building's email address, and I will enter that in as well. And that's all I got.
Let me make just one more comment. Our schedule is going to pick up here at the end. Keep your eyes on the bulletins as well as our website. Make sure you stay up to date. Because we've gotten to these shorter format meetings, we're not covering as much at any one time, and so there will probably be more meetings scheduled. We tried to outline them on our website, but as needed, we will post additional meetings so that we get through this pretty much by the end of June. We need to finish our workshop series and get all your feedback. Any last thoughts from anyone? Open mic?
All callers and everyone who logged on are unmuted. So if you called, feel free to speak. All right.
Well, 5 minutes early.
Well, let's just wrap this up, and you guys have a great day.
Family, and what do you say my family? But I get it. Well, I understand. I think honestly, this is the second day I was looking at, but it doesn't have anything on the table.
Okay. Just getting background noise now. I appreciate everybody attending. We're logging off now.